and talk about Liverpool, and we'll do this in maybe in a bit more of a rapid fire fashion because
Sure.
we can talk a lot about this. Last season, what are your thoughts? It was a big season. I don't think we need to cover all in this one conversation, but just highlights 23-24 for Liverpool Football Club.
I think like great transition season when we dropped out of Europe and had to, have some really smart summer transfer to make ourselves competitive. We're definitely competitive for Europe again. And I think we're very close to being competitive for the Premier League title, with Man City always setting a very high bar this last decade or whatever, right? But I think, the club has turned that small dip in one season's form around very quickly. And I think that's owing to like the entire management, the club leadership, the players, Klopp, and also just the fan support, understanding. So really, I think really, a good season for us, not an A+ season, but I'd probably give us a B+ on the season because we're able to put ourselves in a really good position.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. For me, it was a roller coaster too. Just real high of emotions and some lows. Obviously, not getting everything we wanted and then Klopp leaving, lots of other things like injuries that came along. Some really you know great matches and then matches that were just devastating, or matches like the Spurs match in the beginning of the season with the VAR.
Sure.
Some of the things where you're just kind of
The
like
VAR controversy. Yes.
talking about that for weeks.
Yes.
But yeah, I think we all got I think we all got our hopes up. Some of us, maybe you kept your head more than I did, and there were people sort of thinking we can go for it and we can get it, sort of sweep the board and get all the trophies with Klopp on his way out, which he announced, halfway through the season. But I think that the more sanguine view of it was just transition. Nobody at the beginning of the season expected it to go so well, and once it started going well, hopes and dreams kind of started bubbling up and rising. And in the end, I thought it was just a fantastic year of football. So
Yeah. A lot of fun.
yeah, let's
But
talk
I think
about.
I was just say, like, as Americans, like we can find joy in not having a great season, but it seems like when you're, a native fan there in the UK or Spain or wherever you are, win the trophy, it's like the season didn't happen for you.
Yep, I'm sure that's true for many people. Maybe we can talk more about that. It'd be interesting to talk to some people who have been lifelong fans or are from some of these towns or cities. Let's talk about transfers. We don't know a lot,
Sure.
I don't think, at this point. It's only a few days into the transfer window in the Premier League. I've listed a few names in our notes here of people to talk about. I don't know if you want to add anyone. Do you want to
I
what
think
at the beginning?
no, these are good. Do you want to like just mention the
Go
names and
through them.
then
Okay, so let's start with Kelleher. Kelleher's the number two goalkeeper for Liverpool. Had a phenomenal season where he, partly
Mhm.
because of injury with Alison Becker, the number one goalkeeper and number one on his shirt. He had injuries. Was it December, January? I can't remember. But so that meant that Kelleher went from being sort of the second string goalie and playing in some of the other competitions outside of the Premier League to being number one goalie for a lot of matches. I think he played 50% more or less of the matches that the club played in the season. He had a phenomenal, I mean, just a really good season and sort of came out of the shadow a bit. Uh, but he's 25, I think. Is he the captain for Ireland?
no, I don't know if he's captain for Ireland, but definitely an Irish
He's on
international.
the
He's
international team.
25.
Yeah. So
Contract
his
expires
contract's expiring
2026.
exactly, and so there's been a lot of talk about whether it's time for another firm to snap him up, maybe a lesser Premier League club that could, really, benefit from his skill and experience at a very high level. And then there's others who say, stay. You're still young. Alison Becker's not getting any younger. Alison Becker's in his 30s.
That's right. He's
Phenomenally
like
the best
32.
best goalie in the world, perhaps, but won't be there forever. Has had some injuries. There's a there's a future in which Kelleher can step up, whether it's in a year or 3 years or whatever. But so what are your thoughts on Kelleher and transfer?
Yeah. No, I think he did a great job. I think it'd be tough to lose him on a free transfer in a year. So, right, this is the year where you try to decide if you're going to extend his contract, right? Otherwise, he's going to leave on a free the following. But to me, he's not like a consensus top five goalkeeper. And to me, that means that he's expendable and he's a squad player, and that we will need to look for, you know, a 6'5" goalkeeper with gigantic wingspan that is like a cat and panther. Like
Yep.
we need, all the best teams now have massive specimens, in between the sticks now. And Callagher's just not that big, quite frankly. And unfortunately, I think that just drops him a little bit on the list. So to me, like, I think it's smart business if we offer a 1-year contract extension and then try to move him on actually during that time period. But I think we definitely need him this season, but we should start shopping for a new number one like next season.
That makes sense. One of the things I struggle with as a relatively new sort of avid fan is just sentimentality. And so for me,
Oh, sure,
watched
sure.
him in so many of these situations, I'm just sort of thinking, I don't want him to leave, but then I sort of haven't had maybe enough transfers and sort of transfer seasons to sort of get past that. Kelleher's 6'2", so not
Yeah,
short, but
small.
he's wiry. And
Yeah, yeah.
I was just looking. I've still got the stats from the Dutch team, and their goalie's 76 inches, which is 6'4", and Alison Becker is
Yeah,
6'4". So a couple of
yeah,
inches in height and wingspan, it makes a big difference in those
it
more
does.
goals that you let in. A few fewer clean sheets in a season.
There's some study. There's
Yeah.
some
Oh,
study that
absolutely.
says
And then
for every inch you have, your expected goals or whatever and conceded goals is down. But great, been a great player for the club. Don't have anything bad to say about him.
no.
You
So
know,
if he's still around, we won't be upset, but we'd
that's
understand
right.
decisions. All right, so let's move on to Salah, Egyptian king.
Ooh, juicy stuff. Juicy stuff. Second choice already. What do you think?
I don't think that we should get rid of Salah. I think we should keep him, do everything we can. His contract's up in a year, I think. He is in his early, he's 32 or 31, 31. He's, getting up there. But
32, I think.
you
Yeah.
look at, yes, he had an injury. He came out of the Afro Cup in January, February with an injury. So he missed some of the season, but he was still number one scorer for Liverpool all season. I've forgotten the exact stats, but just, fairly high number of
Yeah.
goals, 25 goals
Yeah.
maybe the season, and still has plenty to offer. And I don't see anyone else, despite having a solid bench of strikers, there isn't anyone else at that level at Liverpool at the moment, who's ready to kind of take on the mantle of top goal scorer in the sort of consistency that Salah has. And he's just an international superstar. So Liverpool sort of has this one main player who is at that level where, they can sort of benefit from that commercially, but also in terms of results. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No, I agree. I think we got to keep him for this next year for sure, for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. I think that, we should expect his production is going to go down a little bit. He's been a player that hasn't really been injured at all during his time with us at Liverpool. And, this season it happened. And
Mhm.
I think that that's the sign of the aging process, and really like the peak years of production, are past him now, I think. And like this injury and what will subsequently happen afterwards is a sign of that. I think, it's sort of similar to his like old Chelsea colleague, Kevin De Bruyne, who's over at Manchester City, got injured earlier in the season, came back and like, had a big impact on the team, but he's just not the same player. And he's also like 32, 33, something like that, getting up there in years, very similar with Salah. Like just two legends of the game in the Premier League, like competing against each other at the highest levels in Manchester City and Liverpool, head to head for years. And it's going to be sad when both these two players take off, but I think they're sort of in similar situations, actually, being recently injured, their age, their peak years of productivity. But, listen, the supporters love him. And, I think Mo is someone who, because of his productivity and the goal scoring records in the Premier League, he's someone who deserves a statue at Anfield.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I don't think this is the time to get rid of him, and maybe in a year obviously there's contract negotiations, and again, one of the things I don't know much about in terms of in football is salaries and how people think about, you know,
Oh yeah, he's
making
also the
money.
highest paid player
He's
in
a highest paid
Liverpool.
player, so there's factors like that that people understand way more deeply than I do, even as just average fans. But so those are the kinds of things that maybe will eventually overcome sort of, sentimentality, or yes, he is a producer of goals, but there will be other factors that people are thinking about because they're doing 3D chess kind of strategy about, well, we need this money for that person who's coming up, you know, and we're
Yeah,
gonna whatever the sort of calculus is, it's beyond my ken. But so anyway, let's move on from Salah. We'll see what happens with him. Nunez, there has been talk about him, and he did have a bit of sort of controversy around him because he deleted all of his Liverpool Instagram photos, and
yes,
had a maybe not the best end to his season, although he's was the second highest goal scorer for the club. So I'm a big fan of Nunez. What are your
yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. I think he's great to watch. He frustrates me a lot, and I think that at the level that we seek to play at and compete with, we need a guaranteed 25 goal a year scorer in the league. Plus, they got to provide 20 to 25 goals, in the other competitions. And some goals matter more than others, right? Now, I think there was some analysis done on Darwin's goals that, a bunch of the matches where he missed stuff, maybe that really wouldn't have affected the outcome that much for us, But there's also something to, once you start scoring goals, it just changes the way defenses have to deal with you, and changes the way your other players around you start to work with you, usually for the better. And so making goals is still better. And I think that's the biggest frustration, but that's the life of a striker. Your
Yeah,
job is to at both ends of the spectrum, goalies and strikers, you live and die by the goal.
yeah,
And so, anyways, we need that kind of score, especially if Salah's not going to have the record leading numbers perennial that he once had. Now, I don't know if we can I think we got Nunez for 75, 80 million euro, something like that.
it was
So
less than that, but he has, I think, with performance, you can
some
get
add-ons.
five or something. Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, but you look at him in the marketplace, you think you probably still could get that price for him. Scores a lot of goals. The thing is he going to be on the team that's going to win the league and win the Champions League? I'm not sure he's that level of striker, and so I'm happy to move on with Nunez and be like, hey, great time, but good luck.
yeah. No, that all makes sense. My final thought on that is just I hope that with Arnie Slot in the next season, something will click and he will go. He has an extremely high number of attempts on goal, and still a very good you know record of actual goals. But he needs to get that ratio up. If he can get his ratio up 10 or 20% or 30%, I think it's a different conversation. And he just needs to finish more of those
Yeah.
goals, and maybe get a little bit more consistency uh, in the next season. And if he can't do that, then I think you're right. We should move on. But I just really like him for different reasons, which we can talk
It's got
about.
good energy, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So okay, Diaz. This is going to be a way longer session than I had thought. Diaz.
Love Diaz. There's rumors around him in Barcelona. I think when you're a South American player, anytime the Spanish league giants come calling, you're always going to have your head turned. I think for Diaz, he'd be even a more impactful player at Liverpool if we had sort of a true sort of like tap in striker playing a central nine. And he doesn't really have that. He's not that great of a goal scorer. He's not really a clinical finisher, and I worry that a lot of the dribbling and things is actually less direct because you're sort of dancing on the ball. And so which is one reason I like Nunez, because Nunez is actually pretty direct with the ball, more so I think than Diaz, who does a little bit too much dancing. I mean, he's not as bad as Jack Grealish, but I think there's a lot of that. So I'm curious how that will fit with Slot, like how direct he's going to really want to be from the wing play. But Diaz, I think, has value in the marketplace. So, if we were to sell him, I think we would get a great price. Then the question is, who are we going to bring in?
Well, this is
And
the challenge.
so
in general.
Yeah.
We can sell all of the players we talked about, but who are we going to buy instead? And
Yeah.
can we get? Who can we afford?
Yeah.
Those players can bring in a decent amount of money to the club. Even
Yeah.
Kelleher as a goalie. But
Yeah.
I would agree with all that. I think I watched Diaz. There were some moments of just pure genius. Well, a lot of moments of pure genius, but then
Sure.
too many times, kind of like with Nunez, but somehow Nunez and Diaz are seen in very different ways. Diaz didn't finish. He'd be within
Yeah.
yards of,
Wasteful.
but he would get far up into the sort of top left corner, and he'd be a few yards from sort of the edge of the pitch, and then he couldn't either get the ball in with a sort of cheeky shot or pass it to someone, and then he'd lose the ball.
Yeah.
But he was so fast and so nimble and running around 3, 4 guys and be up there, but then just like it's like he didn't know why he'd what the sort of objective of that run
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see. I don't think we should get rid of him, but it'll be, as you said, let's see what Slot has in store for him. You mentioned Seth Vandenberg. I read the article. I've forgotten
Yeah.
about him. And you want to say anything about sort of potential incoming transfers?
Yeah, I mean, Sepp is one of like the earliest signings of Klopp when he was just like a very skinny teenager still, central defender. And I think if you've been following Liverpool closely, you might be surprised that defenders get injured so often. And it really, you really need 4 world-class center backs. I don't know if Sepp is a world-class center back. Presumably, if he was, he would be part of the first squad already, and he's not. That said, Joel Matip's leaving the team. Konate's had like injury problems. Kwanzaa is still a young player. Virgil van Dijk's 33 years old. And also Sepp is a left-footed player, if I remember correctly. And so, in the same way that Joe Gomez has been a real great utility back 4 player for us, playing all across the back line, and Andy Robertson's getting up there in age, and Tsimikas is like, he was a better deputy maybe a year or two ago, but age is showing like, without the speed, you don't really have enough quality in Tsimikas to be a 2-way fullback. So might as well just like play a defensive left back in an emergency. And to me, like Sepp offers that versatility like Joe Gomez when we might get really, really thin. And so I like bringing, and then we don't have to purchase a new player. And to me, if we can just spend money actually on attackers, I'm really concerned about the clinical goal finishing. I saw us produce a lot of opportunities. I didn't think the defense was that bad, but I thought it was the finishing that really, really kept us out of the league this year. And so to me, this is a great sort of like cheap way to keep the squad full.
Cool. Very interesting. And I'm just looking him up. One of the reasons I didn't know much about him was because he's been playing in Germany, in Mainz, in the Bundesliga,
Yes.
on loan. The other interesting thing,
Forever.
forever, but he's only 22. He's 6'4".
Yes.
But he's also Dutch. So maybe this.
Yes, and he's also Dutch.
Yeah,
that's right.
So all the things.
A lot of potential there.
Yeah,
a lot of synergies. Okay.
Cool. Interesting. All right, let's keep moving. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time about Klopp. That's probably another episode where we reminisce about Klopp. Yeah. So let's not do that.
Yeah.
For Slot, one of the things I would say about Slot is I haven't heard much about Slot in the last, what has it been, 3 weeks, 3 weeks since he's been on the job.
Good.
Good. He seems to have been on holiday and then probably just doing some basic grunt work of trying to find who he's going to buy and sell and figure stuff out. So I don't have a lot to say about it, except that we don't have a lot to say about him yet. What do you think?
I'm glad, and it makes a lot of sense. There's still a lot of international competitions going on. You're not going to have your full complement of players until end of July, and then it's like then you have like no time. You'll have a little bit of preseason with them, and then you're back at it in the league, end of August. So I think Homie's probably keeping his head down, trying to get his team together, doing the audit on the rest of the sort of like staff, all the support staff, which, as far as we know from Liverpool, just by looking at the product on the field, the support staff must be excellent.
Yeah.
And
finding the bathroom at the
but there's always turnover.
Yeah,
there's always turnover. So just have him take a look at that. And
and
hopefully he's also just getting settled in Liverpool, right?
Yeah.
Like renting a house and maybe getting the kids enrolled in school or, thinking about those things, right? I assume they're off for summer or whatever, but excited for him. But a lot of unknown.
I'm excited too. All right, the final topic, which will be a short one, 24-25 season. the first subtopic of that, I thought we could just talk about VAR because I read that there were some changes coming, which I think are good changes. And
Oh,
VAR, in my mind, has been an interesting topic because I always assume when you think about the way that sort of that kind of system works in other sports, I've seen it feels more automatic and less controversial. And
yes,
computers are involved and they make decisions or they say that was in football's
yes,
case that's offside or not offside, and so it
yes,
should be a little bit more foolproof, less prone to human error, and that was a big theme of last year, which we don't need to get into. But if they are moving to, they voted, so the Premier League teams voted to keep it,
that's right.
but there are going to be some changes. I think it's PGMOL that is in charge of that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so they're going to have some more automatic, and I don't know yet what that means in terms of how it will be implemented, but more automatic situations like determining an offside
yes,
without having to have a human draw lines or check and spend 5 minutes kind of figuring that out. That to me is a good thing, as much as I feel like they should just get rid of VAR. If they can make it work the way I think it should work, or more like the way I think it should work, then I'm all for it.
yeah, yeah. And listen, like VAR on television is very different than VAR in the stadium.
Mhm.
Okay. Like as Americans, you're used to having breaks during the broadcast to show you an instant replay.
Mhm.
But oftentimes, actually, when you're watching live football, there's not even time to show you a replay of stuff sometimes, unless there's a goal, when really there's a break in the action, players are walking or milling about, and they can show you something.
Yeah,
And so you might think to yourself, VAR's not that big of a deal. Sure, they took like 30 seconds to draw the lines and this and that, but when you're in the stadium, and we were talking about this earlier, this is not an American style stadium. There aren't like 50 television screens everywhere telling you what's going on.
right.
At Liverpool, there's zero. Actually, there's no screen, so you really don't know what's happening there. You're at Anfield, and it's there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's a simple scoreboard with the time and the number of goals for each club, and that's it. And so you're in a vacuum, and you really don't know what's going on. And so the more we can get back to allowing the flow of the game to just go and go, I think makes it a more entertaining product for everybody.
Well, and it's designed to be played with less disruption, unlike American football,
Yeah.
which is multiple hours, big breaks. I don't, unlike baseball.
Gosh, slow drip torture for me. Like how many? Keep my eyes peeled open for the commercials. It's terrible.
Just so everyone
Oh,
who doesn't know, VAR stands for Video Assistant Referee, and it's just the sort of system for
yes,
refereeing without being on the pitch. They have a team of people that have videos and cameras and computers and things, and they talk to the referees on the pitch, and then will come in and help the referees, in theory, make the right decision on different aspects of the game. So
that's right.
that is all I have in terms of this 30-minute/70-minute podcast. So Carla, what do you think?
Lovely.
Next time, are you up for another maybe more
Yeah, I mean,
tighter
hey,
agenda next time?
for folks who don't know much about football, certainly have a lot to say about it. So I think
Fair
that's the American way.
Yes.
With
Strong
ignorance just comes more content. So watch out.
Sounds good.
Here we are.
Okay. Thanks,
All
Carl.
right. Cheers.
Thanks,